But don't worry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about that June, July real fucking soon. I bet you we will if I had to put my money on it. What the fuck is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to the Kevin Hoop Show. And just want to put this out there real quick in the beginning. If you are new to the channel, please hit that fucking subscribe button. And without further ado, we are getting right into this with the big fucking question. What is up with Francis fucking Ngannou? I think it's time the Kevin Hoop Show breaks things down and says, all right, this is most likely what's gonna fucking happen. If you have not heard the news though, Francis Ngannou has officially vacated the belt. Now, what does that mean? It means that the belt is up for grabs for anyone who wants it, and right now that's Cyril Gane versus John Jones. Now, Francis Ngannou was recently on the MMA Hour. He was talking about a lot of the behind-the-scenes things that were going on with him and his contract, and obviously his contract came up to an end and they were renegotiating. Now, reportedly, Dana White has came out and said that they offered Francis Ngannou the highest contract that any UFC heavyweight has ever seen before. They were going to pay him the most out of any heavyweight ever. Now, the things that he talked about were he was supposed to, any UFC fighter in the UFC are supposed to be third-party contractors, as in they can really just do anything outside the UFC, and when the UFC needs them, they come in and fight. They're basically like a third-party assassin that just comes in and fights the shit out of somebody whenever they're called upon. Apparently, Francis Ngannou said that there's a lot of things with that you really can't do anything outside of the UFC. You can't go and have a boxing match. You can't go out and get your own sponsorships. Now, I don't know how much of that is true, but I do know that there are some things that I'm sure the UFC would be worried about, as in other people getting injured in a different organization, and I'm sure that there was some safety precautions that the UFC has when it comes to those things. We obviously see when the UFC thinks it's right, with Conor McGregor and Floyd Mayweather, those things sort of happen, and obviously it makes them some fucking money. Now, speaking of Dana White and, the past fights with Francis Ngannou, I want to talk a little bit about their relationship itself. I don't think it was necessarily the best relationship if you actually look back at Francis Ngannou's last fight with Cyril Gane. It was the first time for me recently seeing that Dana White did not put or wrap the belt around the winner of the fight. Looked like it was a little bit of a jab to Francis, like, dude, come on, let's work here. If it was, it was. If it wasn't, then it was just, maybe he was fucking busy. Now, the big thing that's kind of going around right now, and the big, what if, or is this going to happen, is Tyson Fury actually has called out Francis Ngannou. I don't know how serious of a call out that was. I know that there were some things he was saying, like it was going to be in a cage. They were going to wear 4-ounce gloves, and Mike Tyson was basically going to be the ref. That's all he really said on it. But the whole thing with Tyson Fury calling out Francis, I almost feel like one of the reasons he's doing that and kind of why it's such a reach is how much have you guys actually heard about Tyson Fury since this whole Deontay Wilder 3-fight series that they've had, in the past 3-4 years. They've gone back and forth. They've had 3 fights, I believe, against each other, and nothing's really came after that. So I do think that Tyson Fury is now kind of really reaching and kind of being a little desperate. Now, I don't know, again, why he would change all the rules to then help Francis. Doesn't really make sense from a competitor standpoint. But if it were to happen, I think Francis Ngannou should be scared, honestly. I do think that Tyson Fury, especially if it's more boxing catered, Francis Ngannou's not going to take any freaking round from Tyson fucking Fury. Let's be real here. Deontay Wilder, someone who's been boxing since he was fucking 2 years old and couldn't fucking get the job done. So how do you expect Francis Ngannou to do that? When honestly, if you ask me, Francis Ngannou in his last fight against Cyril Gane looked pretty slow on the feet. It seemed like his focus was more on grappling and trying to master the ground game. And I just don't really think that Francis is going to have as much of a boxing technique as someone like Tyson Fury. Cyril Gane was someone who had boxing technique. He was someone who timed his shots. He picked his shots. He was a smart fighter when it came to fighting on the feet. And it just doesn't seem like Francis Ngannou has as much of that as someone like Ciryl Gane, or definitely someone like Tyson Fury, who's the freaking lineal champ, or whatever you want to freaking call it, the lineage. He's freaking been the champ for the past freaking 3 decades, 5 decades, who the fuck knows, but Tyson Fury is not someone to fuck around with on the feet boxing. Just point blank, period. If you just look at the stats, I'm not really talking about making money, but just off of the winning record of someone who came from MMA and does the transition over into boxing, I'm pretty sure they've all fucking lost. Look at Conor McGregor, look at Ben Askren, look at Tyrone Woodley, look at Anderson Silva. Like, if anything, Jake Paul's just been using this as a test thing, as like, yeah, the pattern shows if they go from MMA to boxing, it's a pretty easy fucking win. So that's really where I am on Francis going and fighting fucking Tyson Fury. I kind of just think it's a pipe dream. It just doesn't really seem smart from Francis Ngannou's standpoint. And, you know, with the pattern of MMA fighters always doing that crossover into boxing, it usually doesn't work. So maybe Francis is going to focus on boxing for a little bit before that happens, or maybe gets a little tune-up fight in boxing before he goes and fights Tyson Fury. But I just don't think it's the smartest decision. Especially, I don't think leaving the UFC was the smartest decision in general. Francis Ngannou's only been in the UFC for a short amount of time compared to other fighters that are in the UFC currently. And I do think that he definitely had a lot more potential to make a good amount of money in the UFC. Maybe he could have just signed a 1-year, 2-year contract and, you know, negotiated again after that. Again, I wasn't behind the scenes. I don't know exactly where the UFC was standing and where Francis Ngannou was standing in negotiations. But one thing I do know is a lot of people wanted to see Francis Ngannou versus Jon Jones. That is the fight we all wanted to see. We all wanted to see Jon Jones come back and fight the baddest man on the planet. In my opinion, the baddest man on the planet isn't gonna just go and run away from that fight when it's literally right around the fucking corner. That was obviously going to be the next fight for Francis. It was going to be Jon Jones, the greatest of all time. Imagine knocking that person out. Imagine how much of a fan base you would attain by knocking out Jon Jones. I mean, the majority of Francis's fight, I think out of the 10 that he's had in the UFC, 8 of them have been knockouts. So why the freak wouldn't you just put the money on the line and say, let's fucking do it? I don't care what anybody says, how anybody looks at it. For me, it's as simple as saying yes or no to the fight, and Francis Ngannou said no and left the UFC. And with that, I just want to say the last time we saw Francis against Ciryl Gane was back in January of 2022. That's the last time anybody has seen Francis Ngannou fight. Just put that into perspective a little bit. I'm recording this on January 24th. It has been officially over a year since we've seen Francis Ngannou in the octagon. And before that, it was back in March of 2021. If the UFC is going out and offering him to be the highest paid heavyweight there's ever been by fighting once a fucking year, the dude has to show up once a day, one fucking day out of the year to get paid a shit ton of money. Why wouldn't you do that? It just seems self-explanatory. It seems like a no fucking brainer. Dude, I get it. You're trying to get paid. Your priority is money. I already mentioned that. But to me, that's a fucking easy yes or no. You gotta show up 1 to 2 times out of the year to be the most highest paid UFC fighter there's been in the heavyweight division. Especially when the fans, the people who are going to be paying your fucking paycheck, by the way. Yeah, the UFC signs it, but the UFC won't have all their money if the fans didn't pay the $80 fucking dollars it is now to watch the fight. All of us wanted to see you, Francis Ngannou, fight Jon Jones. It's just simple as that. So if you go out and fight someone that the fans, they don't really want you to fight, or that doesn't really make fucking sense, it seems like it's going to be an easy fucking day for Tyson Fury if he goes out and faces you. I just don't see why I would pay for that. Me personally, maybe I would, you know, compared to like a Jake Paul versus Anderson Silva fight, which obviously I thought Jake Paul was going to win. I was definitely rooting for Anderson Silva, but just again, in the pattern of MMA fighters crossing over into boxing, it doesn't work out a lot of the time. Not to also mention, Steve Bay is kind of, saying, yo, what the fuck? How come I've never been brought back in? Now, I do know that he's been dealing with some personal issues. I was waiting for that fight to happen the second Stipe lost the second fight with Francis. If you guys don't know, Stipe fought Francis one time and won. It went to a decision and he won that. And then it went to a second fight and Francis got the KO. After that happened, I was expecting to see a third fight against those two. And, I was excited to see Stipe back. Stipe, to me, is the GOAT of the heavyweight division. I know some people have it being DC. But in their matchup, actually, if you guys don't know this, Stipe Miocic is 2-3 against Daniel Cormier in the heavyweight division. He has 2 wins over Daniel Cormier's 1. And for those of you who don't know, Daniel Cormier definitely not walking back in the ring with the size of his waistband. I really think, to me, Stipe has really, cemented his legacy as one of the greats, if not the greatest in the heavyweight division in the UFC that we've seen. I do think that, him versus John Jones would have been a more exciting fight than Cyril Gane. But don't worry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to be talking about that June, July real fucking soon. I bet you we will if I had to put my money on it. Just go over and watch the M&A Hour where Ariel Helwani does a live one-on-one interview with Stipe. And they actually talk about it's going to fucking happen. Whether you like it or not, whether it's in June and July, it's going to happen eventually. John Jones, Stipe Miocic, because we all know John Jones is winning against Cyril Gane. Like, do I really have to make a whole video about that? Hopefully you guys are on the same page as me. If you're not, let me know in the fucking comments. I fucking dare you. If you guys enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. And once again, like I said in the beginning, if you're new here, hit that fucking subscribe button, ladies and gentlemen. With that, have a great fucking day.